I watched my roommate spend 3 hours researching the best toothpaste. He compared 47 different brands, read countless reviews, and even built a spreadsheet with pros and cons. This is the same guy who chose his college major in 5 minutes. He's not stupid. He has a 3.9 GPA, but he's trapped in something psychologists call the intelligence paradox. And chances are you are too. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Being smart doesn't make you good at decisions. Sometimes it makes you worse. I discovered this the hard way last year when I made the biggest mistake of my life. Let me explain. Most people think intelligence and decision making are the same thing. They're not. Intelligence is your ability to process information. Decision making is your ability to act on it. And that's where smart people fall apart. Because the smarter you are, the better you become at one dangerous skill, justifying bad decisions. A study from the University of Michigan found something shocking. People with higher IQs are more likely to fall for cognitive biases. Not less likely, more likely. Why? Because they're better at convincing themselves they're right. Smart people can build elaborate, logical arguments for almost anything, even when they're completely wrong. I saw this in myself last year. I was offered 2 job opportunities. One was safe, good pay, a stable company, but boring work. The other was risky, a startup, an uncertain future, but an exciting mission. Every logical person in my life said to take the safe job, but I didn't want to hear that. So I did what smart people do. I rationalized. I found articles about successful entrepreneurs who took risks. I calculated the potential upside of stock options. I convinced myself that playing it safe was actually the risky choice. I built an airtight argument for why the startup was the obvious decision, and I was completely wrong. The startup failed in 8 months. I was unemployed with a gap on my resume. Meanwhile, the safe job promoted 3 people in that same period. But here's what really hurt. Deep down, I knew. From the beginning, I knew the startup was the wrong choice, but I was too smart for my own good. I thought my way into a bad decision instead of feeling my way to the right one. This is what psychologists call motivated reasoning. You start with the conclusion you want, then work backward to justify it. Smart people are exceptional at this. We can make anything sound logical. Here's how to recognize when you're doing it. First, notice when you're spending more time justifying a decision than making it. If you need a PowerPoint presentation to explain why you should date someone, you probably shouldn't date them. If your pros and cons list go on for pages, you're overthinking it. Good decisions usually feel clear. Bad decisions require elaborate explanations. Second, watch out for what I call research paralysis. This is when you keep gathering information because you're afraid to choose. My roommate with the toothpaste? That's research paralysis. He wasn't trying to find the best toothpaste. He was trying to avoid the anxiety of making a choice. Smart people love research because it feels productive. But past a certain point, more information makes decisions harder, not easier. A famous study from Columbia University proved this. They set up a jam tasting booth at a grocery store. When they offered 24 flavors, only 3% of people bought jam. When they offered just 6 flavors, 30% of people bought jam. 10 times more purchases with fewer options. Because the human brain can't handle too much information. We freeze, we overthink, we walk away. Third, be honest about your motivations. This is the hardest one. Sometimes we make decisions for emotional reasons, then dress them up as logical ones. I didn't choose this startup because it was the smart move. I chose it because I wanted to feel like the kind of person who takes bold risks. I wanted the story. The logic came later, and there's nothing wrong with emotional decisions, by the way. Some of the best choices in life are emotional. The problem is lying to yourself about it. When you pretend an emotional choice is logical, you can't evaluate it honestly. You can't course correct when things go wrong, because you've convinced yourself you made the rational choice. So, here's what I learned to do instead. I started using what I call the instant gut check. Before I research anything, before I make my pros and cons list, I ask myself one question. If I had to decide right now, what would I choose? That first instinct is usually right. Not always, but usually. Your gut has access to information your conscious mind doesn't. It's processing thousands of tiny signals too subtle for logic. That feeling in your stomach when someone's lying to you, the excitement when an opportunity is real, the dread when something seems off. Smart people ignore these signals because they can't explain them, but they're often more reliable than any amount of analysis. There's a famous story about firefighters who evacuated a building seconds before it collapsed. When asked why, the commander said it just felt wrong. Later, engineers figured out he'd unconsciously noticed the fire was too quiet. It was burning in the basement, about to bring down the structure. His gut knew before his brain did. That's not magic. That's pattern recognition happening faster than conscious thought. Now, I'm not saying you should make every decision on instinct. Big decisions need thought. But if your gut and your logic are in conflict, pay attention. Usually, one of two things is happening. Either your logic is motivated reasoning in disguise, or your gut is based on outdated fears. You have to figure out which one. Here's how I do it now. I give myself a deadline. For small decisions, 24 hours maximum. For big decisions, 1 week, not 1 month. Not until I feel certain. 1 week. Because certainty is a trap. You'll never feel 100% sure about anything important. If you wait for certainty, you'll either never decide, or you'll decide by default when time runs out. Neither option is good. Successful people aren't more certain than you. They're just more comfortable with uncertainty. They decide, then commit. Smart people do the opposite. They delay, then regret. I also started tracking my decisions, not to judge myself, but to learn my patterns. I write down what I chose and why. Then, 6 months later, I review it. Was I right? Was I wrong? What did I miss? This is humbling, by the way. You'll discover you're wrong a lot more than you think, but you'll also notice patterns. Maybe you're great at career decisions, but terrible at relationship ones. Maybe you overthink small choices, but nail the big ones. Everyone has blind spots. The only way to find yours is to look back honestly. Here's the bottom line. Your intelligence is a tool, not a compass. It can help you analyze options, but it can't tell you what matters. It can help you plan a path, but it can't tell you where to go. Those answers come from somewhere else. Values, intuition, experience, emotion. The smartest decision makers I know use their intelligence in service of their gut, not instead of it. They think clearly, but they feel deeply. They analyze, but they don't paralyze. They know that sometimes the right choice doesn't make perfect sense, and they're okay with that. So here's my challenge to you. Think about a decision you've been avoiding. Not because you lack information, but because you're afraid of making the wrong choice. Now ask yourself, if I had to decide in the next 60 seconds, what would I pick? Whatever answer comes up first, that's probably your answer. Maybe not definitely, but probably. The question is whether you're brave enough to trust it. Because here airs what I've learned. Making the wrong decision quickly is better than making no decision slowly. At least when you're wrong, you learn something. When you avoid deciding, you just stay stuck. And being stuck is the only decision you can't recover from. Thanks for watching. If this helped, let me know in the comments and consider subscribing for more videos like this. See you next time.